Doug Kalitta went red. A very strange series of events here, Tony. We have watched Doug Kalitta be very late in Bristol. Now we've watched him twice in 2 qualifying runs leave early. This one with consequence.
Right now, Doug Kalitta is not in a good place mentally. You go back to qualifying earlier, he fouled out. You go back to the double step just in Bristol where he caught himself, made himself extremely late. But you go back 2 races prior to that, and he had some very close calls. So there's some younger drivers that are doing a little bit better, and that is the reason that Doug Kalitta is just in purgatory right now when it comes to leaving the starting line.
And so Brittany Force will race Tony Schumacher in the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge. And you can see the supercharger dislodged atop the Doug Kalitta engine. Brown, Stewart, Ashley, Kalitta, the quick 4. Salinas, Brittany Force, Torrance, and Torrance, the quick 8. But Tony Stewart, after smoking the tires very early in the first qualifying session, came back with a rousing effort here.
This is the run that this team has been looking for. You have the most extreme conditions that you're going to race in, and it's the work, it's everything that this team has put in over the last couple of weeks that allow this kind of performance sitting in that #1 spot in this second session.
And that brings us to the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge and Funny Car. Prock and Hagen on one side, Todd and Force on the other. Austin Prock, the Cornwell Quality Tools Camaro, lined up now against Matt Hagen. Hagen is the reigning king of Nitro Funny Cars, the defending world champion, but boy, this kid has made some big inroads onto his kingdom.
He really has. He's still a car to beat. He's a driver to beat. Just 2 weeks ago, it was Austin Prock, staying in the 3-second range every round, every time this car went down the track.
What a side-by-side race, and it's Austin Prock as Prock goes 4.12.2 at 315 miles an hour, outrunning the 4.14 at 298. Prock makes one of the quickest runs of the session.
Got to give it to the Dodge team. They put up a heck of a fight. 4.14, only 0.02 of a second off in terms of performance, nearly identical. And you got to wonder if it wasn't for that cylinder, that raw fuel coming out of the pipe of that Dodge before it got to the finish line, if that didn't determine the outcome of this race.
And so the second pair is now at the starting line. John Force will take on J.R. Todd. And if we look at raw performance, Tony, Todd comes in here with a massive advantage, having run about 0.4 of a second quicker than John in qualifying session 1.
Well, that was a business he took care of a couple of weeks ago. He was very consistent. He was about a step or 2 behind Austin Prock, and it showed in that final. They just didn't have the muscle. But on a racetrack like this, you don't need the muscle. You need to work the clutch. You need to make the clutch slip and not those rear tires.
So both teams will send their cars in the right lane. The DHL GR Supra, the Pete Chevrolet Camaro of John Force on the left. Cylinders out for J.R. Todd and for John Force. Both cars wandering around. It is John Force. 4.13 beats a 4.59, and Force had his hands full in the big end.
Yeah, and it looked like J.R. Todd started to slip the tires, started to spin and haze the tires just before John's car did, and both cars had cylinders out. J.R. Todd with the early lead, then the raw fuel coming out. So while he had an early lead, it was an issue with the fuel system, potentially tire slippage to cause that raw fuel to come out.
And we take a look now at our qualifying order of the top half of the field after 2 sessions. Chad Green still lead them all. Then it's Prock, Tasca, Todd, Hagen, Caps, Lee, and Force. There are 17 funny cars on the grounds, and there is a bump spot. We're going to lock it out after the 3rd session. In our Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge ladder here in Pro Stock. Coughlin and Enders one side, Anderson and Glenn on the other. And this first pairing will be Greg Anderson and Dallas Glenn on a racetrack that is some 147 degrees right now. The 2 Pro Stock drivers stage up. They leave. Anderson has just 6 thousandths advantage. And look at the smoke coming out of the back of Glenn's car. He has wounded that machine. He's pulled it out of the groove. And Greg Anderson, for the 2nd race in a row, has beaten Dallas Glenn in a head-to-head situation, 6.62. But Glenn's car is hurt. Well, Tony, that certainly is not what you want to be doing on a 95-degree afternoon as we ride with Greg Anderson.
Almost a carbon copy of what happened a couple of weeks ago. It was Dallas Glenn with some issues in his lane. It was Greg Anderson racing to the victory, but also gets him qualified into the show. And for Dallas Glenn, they may want to check that engine.
And so we look down from the Pep Boys drone. We can see the Skag Power Equipment Camaro of Jeg Coughlin. On top of the screen is the JHG Melling Performance Camaro of Eric Anders. This, of course, went Jeg's way just a couple weeks ago in Bristol.
Yeah, and it went his way because of breakage. So, of course, Erica would love to avenge that loss. And based on how she performed earlier, she has a better car coming into this matchup.
She does. That machine is the class of the field right now. We'll see if she can apply that same level of performance on a racetrack that is now about 20 degrees warmer than they saw it before. The move goes to Coughlin. The 60-foot time goes to Erica. It is close to a dead heat, and it is Erica Enders. 661 beats a 666.6. So Coughlin's car fell off big time in the back half of the racetrack.
Yeah, he got a little bit of a jump off the starting line, made it closer than what we saw at the finish line. But within the first 60 feet, she had outperformed him in every increment beyond there.
200ths, 300ths, then 400ths at the finish line stripe for Erica Enders. She will face Greg Anderson in the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge final. During the session of Pro Stock qualifying, before we got to the mission runs, Eric Latino and Matt Hartford lined up side by side. Both cars with KB Titan power, but Eric Latino, you can see he's comes into this session qualified number 2. And when he made this run, it was the best run of the session, only defeated by Eric Enders by 2,000.
Very impressive considering that amount of heat, the amount of grip that loosens up under these conditions for Eric Latino.
Now we take a look at our qualifying order from session 2. It is Eric Enders leading the field with Latino behind her, Derek Kramer, Hartford Stanfield, Dallas Glenn, Jerry Tucker, and Greg Anderson making up the quick 8 of Pro Stock qualifying. And the Pro Stock Motorcycle Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge battle will be between Gage Herrera and Matt Smith. That is worth the price of admission alone. And Gianna Evaristo and Richard Gadsden. Gadsden, as we mentioned in our earlier qualifying coverage that aired yesterday, is third in the points right now. But Gianna Evaristo put together a nice ride. In fact, probably the best ride she's had in her career as an aggregate. When she won the race in 2019, was an amazing win, but a bunch of stuff went her way. She outrode a few riders at Bristol, Tennessee to get her spot in the final round, one of them being Richard Gadsden. See if Richard can get one back on her here.
Well, it started on the starting line for Gianna. She was able to get 300ths of a jump off of Richard Gadsden, and she outperformed him by a couple of hundreds. So I'm sure that's one of the things that Richard is thinking right now. She got to have a better reaction time. Right now, going based on how they performed in the first session, he has a considerably better machine.
Roughly 400 horsepower these motorcycles make. Get a 10.5-inch wide tire, and of course, when we talk about a track that's this loose, the early part of the ride can determine whether a rider can even make it to the finish line. A couple degrees of angle right to left early in a run often dictates having to lift or cut the throttle off early. And that is exactly the scene early on. Both riders having to manage their power, but it is Gianna Evaristo going red by 0.02 of a second. She went 691.9. It was a faster 684.6 for Gadsden. He goes to the final. And the second pair of the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge, Gage Herrera and Matt Smith. We can see that Gage has made 10 appearances with 6 wins in the Too Fast, Too Tasty Challenge. Matt, half the appearances and 1/3 the victories. But I really don't think any of that matters at this moment. You know, we look at what these motorcycles and riders did during the first qualifying session. Temperatures come up, Tony. What does Matt Smith need to do to try to beat this guy, or even to beat this guy?
He still needs to improve in 60 feet. When you base both or go match both their runs together, Matt Smith is able to match his power, Gage Herrera's power, from the 8th mile. They ran nearly identical speeds at 660 feet. So from the 8th mile to the finish line, they're evenly matched. It's just a Suzuki, the higher revving machine, that is able to out 60-foot Matt Smith. If he can address that in warmer conditions, he could be in the hunt.
The moment that precipitated this matchup today was a whole shot victory for Gage Herrera in Bristol in the semifinal. On the throttle for a second. He was 17 green to Gage's 054. Can Matt give it back to him? A 6:19.79.0 beats a 6:79.5. He did outrun him, but he left on him by 4 high.
Well, this is a match race on a Saturday. This is an opportunity for one rider, in this case, to avenge his loss from a couple of weeks ago. And Matt Smith turned the table. Not as big a crowd, not as much on the line. However, for Matt Smith, this has got to be This has got to be worth it right here to get another shot, to get the jump off the starting line, and he did exactly what he needed to do. He was slightly better in warmer conditions than he was earlier, and the whole shot win made the difference.
He revved the motorcycle just before fully staging it as well. Intentionally or not, you could hear that V-twin engine rumble. The Tricky Ricky jeans do not fall far from the Matt Smith tree. Little dunk of water down his back from Angie Smith as we look back on the second qualifying session. Chase Van Zandt on one side, Hector Rana Jr. on the other. And look at Van Zandt. Never misses an opportunity to crush the Christmas tree. Made a very good run here.
And it was a great first section of the racetrack for Van Zandt. And you can see the kind of performance at the density altitude that the much lower elevation than what we saw a couple of weeks ago gives these riders in hot conditions. They're still performing well.
After the second qualifying session, Gage Herrera leads Richard Gadsden, Matt Smith, Chase Van Zandt, John Hall, Hector Rana Jr., Steve Johnson, and Gian Evaristo, the quickest motorcycles on the property. When we come back, the Mission Too Fast, Too Tasty action moves to qualifying, moves to nitro, and moves to more fun. And that is one rider who's going to want to get one back on Matt Smith tomorrow. Stay with us. We'll be right back to Boiling Hot, Virginia.
When migraine strikes, you're faced with a choice. Ride it out with the trade-offs of treating or push through the pain and symptoms. With Ubrelvy, there's another option. One dose works fast to eliminate migraine pain. Treat it anytime, anywhere, without worrying where you are or if it's too late. Do not take with strong CYP3A4 inhibitors. Allergic reactions to Ubrelvy can happen. Most common side effects were nausea and sleepiness. Migraine pain relief starts with you. Ask about Ubrelvy. Learn how AbbVie could help you save.
Tonight, in your spacious La Quinta suite, your eyes could use a break after a long day of seeing, things. But hey, free waffles always make you forget. Because at La Quinta, we work as hard as you do. So that tonight, you can be the agent of destruction. We get it. You've been building connections all day. Go ahead, demolish that personal record. Tonight, La Quinta. Tomorrow, you shine.
Get ready to race down the track with Mission Foods. It's a green light for the NHRA Mission Foods Drag Racing Series, packed with fast action and tasty products. Fully loaded tacos, fast wraps, piled high nachos. Whatever you crave, Mission will help you be race ready with easy-to-make recipes that will take your race day to the finish line. Keep your racing delicious and enjoy all the mouth-watering action. Brought to you by Mission Foods. Too fast, too tasty.
Gonna do the two-step in cowboy boogie. Grab a sweetheart.
You could start a farm in your apartment, or you could get fresh groceries delivered.
We have to move.
Guys, how frustrating is it to find a great pair of jeans? Too tight here, too loose there, too long there? Standard jeans use just 2 measurements. Tailor Custom Jeans use 7 different measurements to give you the perfect fit. Your phone can measure you right now. Download the Tailor app on iOS or Android. Choose from hundreds of styles.